In just a few minutes, you can build amazing, good-looking apps using UiPath Apps. It's a low-code platform. Let's see in the next couple of minutes a good sneak peek into what we have improvised in UiPath Apps. We have Evan from the apps team, who is Senior Product Manager, taking us through this session. Evan, over to you.
Thanks, Tejas. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever you are. My name is Evan Cohen, Product Manager for UiPath Apps, broadcasting to you from Seattle, Washington. Today, I'm excited to share the latest about UiPath Apps and give you a sneak preview of some of our upcoming features. Before we begin, I'd like to give a quick shout out to all of you who have completed the Apps Academy course. You all rock. And the course was released in February of this year. And if you haven't taken it yet, I highly suggest you check it out. For those of you that are new to apps or haven't had the chance to explore it deeply, here's a 30-second version. UiPath Apps is a cloud-based, low-code application development platform that enables RPA developers to build and share enterprise-grade apps that deliver engaging experiences and faster automation. Now, Apps has two parts. The first is App Studio, which allows you to build rich interfaces on top of your automation. And the second is the app's end user experience, sometimes referred to as apps runtime. Now, with apps, you can design your own custom launchpad that aggregates data in real time from multiple different systems and publishes data to different systems, including legacy ones, through the use of attended or unattended robots. And once those are built, those apps can be published and made available to anyone in your organization in a single click. Now, this session is going to be broken down into three parts. First, I'll show you an example of an end user experience. Then we'll dig into the authoring experience and highlight some key features from 21.4, as well as taking a sneak peek into some of the latest in apps. And finally, I'll share with you what you can expect to see from apps later this year. Let's jump straight into it. For this demo, I'd like to introduce a bank teller named Bertha. Bertha works as an employee of a retail bank called UI Bank. In the next couple of minutes, I'm going to show you how Bertha is able to deliver an excellent customer experience using UiPath Apps. I'd also like to introduce Mike, a customer of UI Bank. Yesterday, Mike set up an appointment via chatbot to complete a couple of tasks, and now he's meeting with Bertha to complete them. When Mike approaches Bertha, she greets him by launching the Banker Console, built, of course, with UiPath Apps, either from her desktop or, as of 21.4, directly from the UiPath Assistant. As the app loads, an automation begins to check her calendar and pull out those appointment details, which frees her up to chat about Mike about his day, rather than trying to find those appointment details inside of her calendar. And based on that calendar information, the automation quickly begins to load Mike's information into her console. They can see multiple different processes executing in parallel, which allows the attended robot to shorten the overall time it takes to execute. Now, for the purposes of this demo, I've allowed this terminal window to show, but in the real world, it would either be run as a background process or picture-in-picture. Now, this is a standalone app, but UiPath Apps can also be embedded into existing applications, and that makes them flexible to meet the customer where they are, including popular CRMs like Salesforce and NetSuite. Now that our automation has aggregated this information from multiple different systems, Bertha sees that Mike is trying to complete his loan application and set up a safety deposit box. She knows that setting up a safety deposit box is quick and easy, so she decides to get that out of the way first. She selects the prompt, and the process begins to run to collect details about available box sizes. Since Mike wants a medium 5x10 box and would also like autopay to be enabled, all that's left is to collect Mike's signature and then reserve that new box. And just like that, she's taken what used to be a 10-minute process down to less than a minute. Now, we're going to hit pause on this scenario because we're actually going to build out the loan approval flow together, live using App Studio. As I mentioned before, App Studio lets you build and deploy high-quality automation-powered apps. And we're going to go through the app building process together right now. Now, in the interest of time, I've already created a simplified version of the UI Banker console on another account and exported that as a template. And now I'm going to import it into this next one. So I've logged into my Automation Cloud account, and I'm going to go ahead and click Create New. And I'm going to name my app DevCon UI Banker. And I'm going to select that template that I exported from that other account. One of our most popular feature asks after GA was the ability to move apps between Automation Cloud organizations. And as of 21.4, you no longer have to rebind the different controls in your app when you're moving apps between those different organizations and Automation Cloud accounts. Instead, you can quickly replace the processes that are used in App Studio with processes from any available folder or tenant in your current Automation Cloud account. And we automatically suggest matches to make this task even easier. And that means that if you're using different processes for development and production, or if you're a vendor, it means that you can build an app-based solution powered by RPA and easily deploy and customize it for multiple different customers. Or if you're building apps within an organization, deploy it to different groups. Speaking of groups, as of 21.4, you can now share apps with groups created in Automation Cloud or synced from Active Directory. That makes it easy to share your apps with specific parts of your organization and helps simplify the orchestration and governance process. Now, I've shared this app with the bank tellers group with user permissions. So once I'm done with this app and publish it, they'll have instant access. Let's go to the main page of the app here and drill into the loan approvals flow. Now, when I go and look at the event for this Start Process button, we can see that I'm opening up the loan page in a modal window. So let's focus on that page for now, because that'll be the primary focus of this demo. I'm going to go ahead and set the loan page as the start page for this app. So while we're working on this, it's easier for us to test. Now, we're going to be building out this first step in the loan verification process to perform a credit check. Now, rather than copying and pasting the view from below, I'm going to go ahead and build this from scratch. And I'm going to add 2 containers within this container. And I'm going to adjust their size to 40% and 60%. Now, I could easily copy and paste this button to duplicated styles, but instead I'm going to add a button from the controls panel and style it using some of the defaults provided. So I'm going to select outlined, and I could, if I wanted to, have further customization, but I won't do that for now. I'm going to rename the text on this button to Start Process, and then I'm going to select an icon. Now, there are tons of icons to choose from. I find that the easiest way to search for a specific icon is just to use the search bar at the top. And this is the play icon. And I can double click to add it. Now I'm going to go into the event for this button. And when the user clicks on this button, I want to start a process. And the process that I'm going to start is our credit check process. Now, we've already wired up the inputs for this process. And so all we have to do is provide the user some feedback while that process is running. So I'm going to add a spinner to show when that process is running and hide it once it's complete. Next, I'm going to add a text box to visualize the output of that process. And there are a couple of different outputs. The first of which is the credit score. And the second is the credit report URL, which is generated by that process. Now we're just going to use the credit score for now. And we're going to go ahead and preview this. And when I click this Start Process button, I would expect that process to start. If I check my assistant, I can see that process is running. And there we go. The results come back. Credit score of 820. Great. Next, I'm going to add another control here. And I'm going to add that control inside of a container. And on that control that I've added inside this container, oops, there we go. I'm going to start building an expression. And with an expression, we can use an Excel-like formula to define a property or a specific value for our controls. And in this case, it's just going to be the text of this label right here. Expressions are extremely powerful. I'm going to bump up the font size real quick before I start building this expression. I'm going to start that expression just by typing equals. And now, just like I can say in Excel, I can use an open quotes to define a string. And I'll type in credit score is, and then use a space and end my quotes, and then use an ampersand to concatenate a string. And then all I have to do is click and drag the process output and add it to the end of that expression. And now at runtime, when we go ahead and preview this app, we'll see that the credit score gets appended to this string once it's populated by the process. And once we run this process and the results come back, we see that the expression's value has updated live. Now, just like in Excel, if you change the dependent value, the expression will update. Now, we don't really want to show this empty credit score string before the credit score comes back. So let's go ahead and hide this container until the process is done running. And the way we're going to do that is go to its hidden property and assign it to an expression. We're going to use the isBlank function. And that function allows us to check to see if a specific value is blank. In this case, we're going to look at the credit score. So the process is actually what seeds the value there. And we're going to do the exact same thing on this checkbox. So after we run our process and the credit score has a value, we'll show both this checkbox and we'll show the credit score string text at the bottom. The next thing I want to do is add a checkbox. Now, before we run a credit check on a customer, we want to make sure that we have consent to perform a credit check because that may impact their credit score. So I'm going to add some text to this checkbox and put the checkbox on the right-hand side, just so we have some visual symmetry with step 2. Add a little bit of margin and padding here. Great. And now I'm going to add a label beneath it and also add some of the same styling. We'll call this the review step, where we ask the banker to review the results of the credit check. So apply that same margin there, 20 pixels. Awesome. And now to go back to this checkbox, I'm going to rename it customer consent. And that's just so we can keep track of it. And you'll see why in a second. I'm going to go to this start process button. And I don't want this button to be enabled until the banker has actually checked this box. So I'm going to go to its disabled property. And I'm going to use the not function. And then I'm going to search for that checkbox controls value. Double click to insert it. And now when this button is not checked, this text box will be disabled. Let's just try that out real quick. Now, if I toggle the state of this checkbox, I can see that my button becomes enabled and disabled, just as we'd expect. Fantastic. Now, I said that we were going to use that credit check URL. So I'm going to add a download button here. And on the clicked on for that button, I'm going to open up a URL. And the URL that I'm going to use, I'm going to assign to expression. So this is something that I could build dynamically. But in our case, it's just a direct output of the process. And next, I'm going to add a label here. And we're going to use this label to perform some kind of validation. Now, typically, banks will not write a loan for anybody who has a credit score that is less than 610. So I'm going to add a warning label here with some conditional visibility that will tell the banker that their credit score is too low to actually take out a loan. So giving this label some text. And looks good. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here. I actually don't want to preview. I want to assign conditional visibility. So let me go ahead and close that preview. And I'll go into the hidden field for this label, and I'll write an expression. In this case, I'm going to check to see if the credit score is greater than or equal to 610. Let's go ahead and preview that. And we'll run this process once more. And when the results come back, we can actually tweak them to test to see if our validation works. And indeed it does. If we change the credit score to 600, then we see that validation. It's awesome. Now let's remove this text box, set the main page as our start page, and pick things back up with Bertha and begin this flow once more. Now, as before, as the app loads, an automation is going to look at Bertha's calendar to identify her appointment. And then based on that calendar information, the automation is going to quickly load in Mike's information into her console. Now, when we go through this loan approval flow, Bertha is guided to ask Mark to approve a credit check, which she does. And then she's prompted to request additional information from Mike, including his ID, and latest tax form. So Mike hands her his latest tax form and his passport, and Bertha scans them on her desk scanner, where they're then transferred to a designated network file share. And then a UiPath attended automation running in the background is watching that shared drive for new files and triggers an analysis right after they're scanned. And our trigger framework enables the robot to monitor many events and then take action to support the user. So once those two documents are scanned, the data is extracted and then injected into the console for Bertha to verify. The application then prompts Bertha to verify Mike's passport, and she marks him as verified. And the banker console now shows all of the information that the bank needs that has been collected about Mike and his loan application, and is then queued up for review by the underwriting team. Now, this is a great example of hybrid automation that's being used from apps, attended automation that hands off to an unattended back office process. Now, when that process completes, Mike's going to get an email saying that his loan has been approved. And just like that, we were able to add a new flow to our app, and the UI Bank now has another happy customer. This, of course, is just a small slice of what apps can do, but I hope it gives you a taste of the experiences you can build when you add expressions into the mix. Now, expressions isn't the only thing that we have in the oven. We also have a bunch of other items on our roadmap that I'd like to share with you. We have tons of enhancements planned for expressions, like more functions and capabilities like static dropdowns, which will expand authoring capabilities exponentially. We also plan to ship data service integration, so you can read and write data directly from apps without having to rely on a process to do that. We have additional controls like file control to enable you to build apps that browse for files that can then be used with attended and unattended automation and with data service. And finally, on-premise. That's right, App Studio and the runtime experience will be available fully on-premise later this year. One other thing I'd like to note here is that you can already use your on-premise orchestrator with apps in the cloud. And when you use attended automation from apps, no customer data leaves your organization's on-premise data boundary. You can learn about this and more inside our apps documentation. A huge thank you from the apps and product and engineering team to all of you for being here today. We wish we had more time, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. As a reminder, UiPath Apps is already GA in Automation Cloud. To learn more about building apps, you can check out the Apps Academy course on academy.uipath.com. And to stay up to date with the latest on apps and everything else UiPath, sign up for UiPath Insiders at uipath.com/insider. Once you're registered, you'll always be up to date on what we're building, and you'll receive an exclusive invite to our monthly product demo days. And using the Insider portal, all of your feedback goes directly to me and the rest of the product and engineering team to help shape our roadmap. The feedback that you provide there and on the forum is invaluable to us, so please keep it coming. And as always, we can't wait to see what you build. Thank you. Tejas, back to you.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you so much. Before I let you go, I have a couple of questions. The very first one is, where can I find more examples of expressions?
So in the demo, we already talked about examples for validation and progressive disclosure, but inside of the Insiders portal in the Expressions private preview, you can find a playground app that contains a bunch of more examples of different expressions.
Thanks, Evan. Apps are actually thought of in contact center scenarios only. Are there any more examples?
So apps absolutely exist beyond the contact center space. We've seen exciting use cases in hotels where we've created apps for hotel staff to help book out experiences and integrate with their existing CRM systems. We've seen apps in HR to help accelerate employee onboarding and much, much more.
Thanks for those answers, Evan, and thanks for a wonderful session. I hope all of you try UiPath Apps today. Let's go to the next one.